The Middle East has been thrust into a volatile new chapter as a massive, coordinated military campaign between the United States and Israel, codenamed Operation Epic Fury and Roaring Lion, has fundamentally dismantled the regional status quo. Following the death of Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei in an early precision strike, Tehran has unleashed a desperate, wide-ranging retaliatory barrage, marking an unprecedented escalation that now engulfs multiple nations. The current conflict, which erupted in full force on February 28, 2026, followed the collapse of delicate back-channel nuclear negotiations. In a rapid shock and awe opening salvo, U.S. and Israeli forces targeted the heart of the Iranian regime. A high-precision strike leveled the compound in Tehran used by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, resulting in his death and the elimination of several senior military and government figures. The campaign's objectives were immediately stated as the destruction of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, the neutralization of its ballistic missile stockpiles, and the decapitation of its leadership to prevent a nuclear breakout. Over the subsequent week, the joint forces have conducted thousands of sorties, claiming to have achieved near total air superiority and the destruction of roughly 80% of Iran's air defense systems. In direct response, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, abandoned its long-standing doctrine of strategic patience. Tehran launched waves of ballistic missiles and armed drones, not only toward Israel but also against U.S. military installations and critical energy infrastructure across the Gulf, including sites in Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. The conflict has severely damaged regional natural gas facilities and threatened global energy security, with the Iranian military repeatedly threatening to close the strategic Strait of Hormuz. The international community remains deeply fractured, with the escalation drawing sharp lines across global diplomacy. The United States and Israel have framed the operation as an act of necessary self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter, citing Iran's continued pursuit of nuclear capabilities and its destabilizing proxy networks. Canada and Australia have expressed open support for the US-led effort. Conversely, the Kremlin and Beijing have issued scathing condemnations, labeling the strikes an unprovoked and reckless act of military aggression, and a blatant violation of sovereignty designed to force illegal regime change. European powers, specifically the UK, France, and Germany, have adopted a more cautious stance. While they have condemned Iran's retaliatory strikes on Gulf states and civilian infrastructure, they have simultaneously called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to the negotiating table, signaling a desire to avoid being pulled into a wider, uncontrollable regional conflagration. Regional states, particularly those in the Gulf Cooperation Council, are walking a perilous tightrope. Having historically sought a balance between Washington and Tehran, many have been forced to permit the use of their bases for the U.S. operations, while desperately trying to limit the domestic fallout from Iranian missile strikes on their own territory. The military landscape of the Middle East has undergone a structural transformation. The coalition campaign has effectively collapsed the Ring of Fire, the network of proxies and missile sites Iran spent decades cultivating to encircle Israel and shield itself from direct confrontation. By prioritizing the systematic suppression of Iranian air defenses and the destruction of fixed launch platforms, the coalition has severely degraded Iran's ability to conduct a sustained, conventional war. The focus has now shifted to targeting defense industrial assets, including missile production facilities and logistics hubs, to ensure Iran cannot reconstitute its offensive capacity. However, the threat remains asymmetric. As Iran's high-end conventional systems are whittled down, its military is increasingly relying on swarms of low-cost, expendable drones. These present a persistent, difficult-to-intercept threat to U.S. naval assets, regional military bases, and civilian energy infrastructure. The conflict has forced a significant increase in the ballistic missile defense posture of NATO and regional allies, as military planners scramble to secure vital assets against this evolving, high-tempo drone warfare. The political consequences of the conflict are profound and, as of now, largely unpredictable. The most immediate impact is the leadership crisis in Tehran. With the death of Supreme Leader Khamenei, the regime is struggling to maintain cohesion while under bombardment. The Assembly of Experts, the body tasked with appointing the next leader, has reportedly been targeted, further complicating succession and signaling an intent to fracture the regime's central decision-making. In the United States, the administration faces criticism for the lack of public debate or congressional authorization for such a major military operation. President Trump has asserted that he intends to play a direct role in the eventual selection of Iran's leadership, labeling the potential successor, Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, as unacceptable. This move raises concerns about how far the U.S. is willing to go in engineering a successor regime, and whether there is a viable political endgame. Domestically within Iran, the war has been a double-edged sword. While it has initially silenced the anti-regime protests that plagued the country throughout early 2026, it is unclear if this will lead to genuine national unity or merely temporary submission under the shadow of overwhelming force. Strategic analysts are warning that while the coalition is winning the tactical air war, they may be losing sight of the strategic reality. The central assumption, that Iran is a brittle dictatorship ready to collapse under pressure, is being heavily debated. Many experts argue that the regime's survival instinct is deeply entrenched, and that pushing for total regime change without a clear, viable alternative is a high-stakes gamble that could lead to state collapse and a power vacuum in the heart of the Middle East. There is also significant concern regarding the durability of the current U.S.-Israel Gulf alignment. Should the conflict drag on, the economic costs and the domestic pressure from regional civilian populations could force Gulf leaders to reconsider their cooperation. Analysts emphasize that a military victory in terms of degrading assets does not equate to long-term stability, and without a robust diplomatic framework, the region faces the prospect of protracted, low-intensity conflict or the permanent destabilization of the Iranian state. The conflict between the U.S.-Israel coalition and Iran has escalated into a full-scale regional crisis with global ramifications, touching everything from energy prices to the future of the Middle Eastern power structure. As the military campaign continues to dismantle Iran's defensive capabilities, the world watches for signs of regime fracture or potential, yet elusive, diplomatic de-escalation.